I'm Scott Lucas. This is today's EA Worldview on Iran. 5 myths about the nuclear deal and the 2 lessons from them. On November 24th, Iran and the 5+1 powers, after more than a decade of on-off negotiations, finally signed a nuclear deal. But it's only an interim nuclear deal covering the next 6 months. Iran will suspend its enrichment of 20% uranium, and it will convert its existing stock into a form which cannot be weaponized. Not today, not tomorrow, not at any point in the distant future. In return, the US and other powers will start to ease sanctions on the Iranian economy, in the short term, freeing up about $8 billion of assets and removing restrictions on insurance, which have been hampering Iran's oil exports. All right, that's the nuts and bolts of the deal. Simple enough, right? Not really. Already there are 5 myths which have circulated about the deal, which distort it. For example, myth 1. Iran retains a nuclear weapons capability under the deal. No, it doesn't. The argument says that because Iran can continue to have a stock of 3.5% uranium and can continue to develop that potentially, that it can somehow amass enough where it has breakout capability within 2 months to produce a bomb. Whoa, stop. Here's a basic fact. You can have a planet of 3.5% uranium and it will not blow up. Uranium can only be used for a nuclear weapon if it's enriched to more than 90%. What happens, however, under this myth is that somehow if Iran has like thousands of kilograms of 3.5%, then it can enrich this to 20% and then to that critical 90% plus level. Potentially, yes. But to do that, Iran would effectively have to break the terms of the deal. It would have to throw out the inspectors who are allowed into Iran's nuclear facilities on a daily basis. It would somehow have to sneak this production past the eyes of the world, or it would have to defy the United States and Europe and other powers and say, to hell with you, we're going to have a weapon anyway. Which raises the question, if Iran really wanted to do this, why did they agree to an interim nuclear deal 2 weeks ago? There is an argument which says, they must have a secret site somewhere inside a mountain or deep underground. They're going to continue to develop this 90% plus uranium. No, they aren't. There is no such secret site. There has not been one over this past year. There will not be one in the near future. Myth 2. President Obama sold out the people of Syria to get an Iran deal. No, he didn't. The US government has been pursuing back-channel talks with Iran going back to March of this year, and indeed on an on-off basis over the last few years. In August of this year, President Obama, as you know, stepped back from intervening militarily in Syria. So some people have put 2 and 2 together and created 1,000. It must be because of those secret Iran negotiations that Obama refrained from intervening in Syria. I don't agree with Obama's decision not to intervene, but it wasn't because of Iran. He did so because he feared what the outcome of the intervention would be. He did so because he felt he could not proceed with congressional support. He did so because, to be honest with you, he really doesn't want to defend or to work with the insurgency in Syria's civil war. He just wishes the conflict would go away. But no, his selling out of the Syria people was not because of the nuclear deal. Myth 3. Saudi Arabia is very, very, very upset. Well, there may be a part truth to this myth. There may be some in Saudi Arabia who preferred not to have seen a deal go ahead. Supposedly, for example, the former head of intelligence, Prince Turki, has said that Riyadh is quite distracted by what has happened in the last few weeks. But in fact, Syria's main concern is not over the nuclear issue, it is over regional power. And specifically, it is over what is happening in the Syria conflict. In some respects, Saudi Arabia is quite happy to have the Iran nuclear issue off the table, because if Iran can be held to its terms, in fact, if Tehran willingly agrees that it does not want a nuclear weapon, it de-escalates the military side of the issue. That doesn't mean Saudi Arabia is going to be politically happy with Iran. They may be competing for influence in Iraq, or in Gulf states such as Bahrain, or in Syria. But it does mean that Saudi can negotiate this with the Iranians. And indeed, over the last week, what we have seen is not Saudi hostility and the threatening of military action. What we have seen is that Iran is launching basically a détente, with Foreign Minister Zarif going to Gulf states and with President Rouhani expressing his deep interest in engagement with Saudi's leaders. Myth 4. Iran is a regional powerhouse because of this deal. Almost overnight, Iran has moved from the power which was crippled by sanctions, boxed in by the United States and Europe, hindered from being able to provide for its own people, into somehow not just being a part of the Middle East, but dominating it. Syria, Iraq, Palestine. The Iranians now can unleash their full force of soft power, covert operations, and political conniving. Whoa, wait a minute. This deal doesn't begin to lift most of the sanctions on Iran. It unfreezes some assets, that is true. It also lifts the ban on insurance over Iranian tankers, which gives the potential for the oil market to recover. But that will take months. And indeed, Iran's recovery from the years of economic mismanagement, strife, and sanctions will take a long time indeed. Only now is President Rouhani beginning to say that inflation has been stabilized and he can get to grips with the economic mess that was left by his predecessor. So no, Iran is not a regional powerhouse because of this deal. It will continue to try to have influence, saying be part of the talks over the Syrian conflict. It will work with groups with whom it is sympathetic in Iraq. But it has not become basically a menace, albeit one without nuclear weapons. Myth 5. The United States has given up its power. It is weak because of this deal. That one has a part truth to it. So let's hold on just a second. Take the 5 myths together and ask what's going on here, and you get 2 lessons. The first is that the myths are basically being put out by people who didn't want any nuclear deal. Iran could have basically given up every scrap of uranium, and still these people, some of whom work for the Brookings Institution, the American Enterprise Institute, the Foundation of the Defense of Democracies, columnists for the Washington Post, the New York Times, they still would have said that Iran could not be trusted, that it cheats, that it is bent on having a nuclear weapon. So of course they're going to say and create myths such as that even if Iran has 3.5% uranium, it could break out within 2 months to make that weapon that we all fear. But there's a second lesson here, and it goes beyond simply portraying Iran as the eternal threat. And that is the lesson of people who really can't come to grips with the fact that the United States no longer dictates the terms in the Middle East, let alone much of the world. When they say that America's lost power because of this deal, what they're saying is, we really wish Washington could have gone in and imposed this. And by doing so, it would have basically worked with its allies like Saudi Arabia and Israel to make the Middle East and the Persian Gulf the way that we want it. Well, folks, those days are gone. It was shown in part by the Arab Spring in 2011, with events from Egypt, Tunisia, Libya. It has certainly been shown recently by events in Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Syria. The United States' moment of trying to be a unipolar leader in the Middle East evaporated when it screwed up, when it messed up, when it made the almost fatal mistake of going to war with Iraq in 2003 and putting itself into the catastrophe that ensued. You can't remake those days. So no matter how many myths you try to put out about Iran's nuclear deal to try to claim in some way that what the world really needed is U.S. power, but that regrettably we don't have it, those myths don't work. I'm Scott Lucas, and this has been today's EA Worldview on Iran.